I'm afraid your current role isn't the best fit for the direction we're heading, Eleanor Vance said. She leaned back slightly in her sleek, modern office chair, a subtle glint of satisfaction softening the otherwise professional mask she wore. The Seacliff Resort initiative really requires someone with a different strategic approach. Her voice was smooth, polished, the words carefully chosen to sound like objective corporate restructuring. But the underlying message stung with familiar sharpness. I kept my expression neutral, my hands resting calmly in my lap, refusing to let her see the tremor of anger that shot through me. Through the expansive glass walls of her office, a corner unit overlooking the bustling downtown streets, I could see the heads of my colleagues at Apex Design Collective occasionally turn in our direction, their curiosity piqued. The same Seacliff Resort initiative, I began, my voice low but steady. Where my proposed redesign resulted in verified savings of over $300,000 for the client? Eleanor offered a dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand. Your redesign, Ava? She questioned, raising a sculpted eyebrow. I recall presenting that revised concept to the board myself. Yes, I countered, meeting her gaze directly. After I developed it, ran the projections, and finalized the technical specifications. Supporting the design VP is part of your role, Ava, Eleanor reminded me coolly, though the title felt like a recent, convenient addition to her arsenal. That's what senior designers do. She let out a quiet, almost theatrical sigh, a practiced display of reluctance. Look, Ava, this arrangement, it's simply not yielding the synergy the firm expects. ADC needs team members who fully align with the established leadership structure and vision. Her meaning was crystal clear. She needed someone who knew their place, someone who wouldn't challenge her authority or, more importantly, her claims to brilliance. A strange, chilling calm washed over me, pushing back the initial heat of indignation. I nodded slowly, processing the finality in her tone. I understand the company's position perfectly, Eleanor, I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside. However, I must formally state that I disagree with this assessment. I will need to request a review of this decision and will be taking the necessary steps to ensure my contributions are properly evaluated. Eleanor's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, the smooth facade flickering for just a second. She hadn't expected direct opposition, perhaps just quiet resentment or resignation. All standard procedures will be followed, of course, she replied smoothly, recovering quickly. HR will outline the transition details. It's simply a matter of optimizing our resources for future growth. She offered a tight, insincere smile. I do wish you the best in your future endeavors, Ava. I stood, my movements deliberate and unhurried. Thank you, Eleanor. I anticipate the next steps will be illuminating. As I turned and walked towards the door, her gaze felt like ice on my back. I am Ava Sharma, 47 years old, a senior architectural designer at Apex Design Collective, or ADC as we call it. For 7 years here, and 25 years in the demanding field of architecture, I've poured my energy into creating innovative, sustainable designs for our most complex projects. My true passion lies in crafting spaces where cutting-edge aesthetics meet practical functionality, where environmental responsibility is seamlessly integrated, and crucially, where we deliver exceptional results under budget. It's a challenging balance, but one I've consistently achieved. So, what obstacle stands between me and the recognition my work deserves? Eleanor Vance, 42, Design Department Head and Vice President at ADC. She arrived a few years after me, a whirlwind of calculated charm and ambition, quickly maneuvering her way up the corporate ladder. Eleanor possesses an undeniable talent for networking and navigating internal politics. But her most honed skill is harvesting the creative labor of others, especially mine, and presenting it, flawlessly, as her own brilliant conception. Her meteoric rise was fueled by cleverly appropriated concepts and strategically redirected credit. And now, it seemed, she'd decided I was no longer a valuable asset to exploit, but a potential liability to eliminate. Perhaps my quiet persistence in seeking acknowledgement for my contributions had become too inconvenient. Perhaps she sensed that others, like Marcus, were beginning to see the pattern. The disparity between her polished presentations and her actual design input. Whatever her underlying motive, fear, ambition, or simple ruthlessness, she had made her decisive move. Walking back through the open-plan office towards my workstation, I deliberately avoided looking at the digital displays showcasing our recent projects. The sleek lines of the Seacliff Resort Initiative, the community-focused design of the Maple Creek Civic Hub, the elegant silhouette of Horizon Point residences, projects I had dedicated countless hours, innovative ideas, and a piece of my professional soul to. Yet, the internal announcements and client-facing materials invariably highlighted Eleanor's visionary leadership as the driving force. My phone vibrated silently in my pocket. A message from Marcus Jones, one of our most talented senior designers and a trusted friend. Just saw you leave Eleanor's office. Everything okay? She looked intense. Intense wasn't the word. Smug, perhaps, beneath the carefully constructed veneer of corporate necessity. I typed back a brief reply, my fingers tight. She's letting me go. Restructuring. His response was immediate. What? That's unbelievable, Ava. Your sustainable coastal project just won the National Sustainable Design Prize. Her coastal restoration project, according to the official ADC press release and the acceptance speech she gave alone at the awards ceremony. The memory still burned. I reached my desk, the familiar space suddenly feeling temporary, alien. I logged into my secure cloud storage account, navigating through meticulously organized folders. Here resided the digital fortress I'd begun constructing months ago, copies of all my original design files, complete with metadata proving timestamps and authorship, detailed email chains tracking the evolution of concepts, internal memos and documentation. My insurance policy. The unease had started subtly, growing stronger when Eleanor's behavior shifted from simply taking credit to actively undermining my contributions in meetings, reframing my ideas, and reassigning key aspects of my projects to herself. The final trigger had been her request, just yesterday, for complete access to all my project archives, for departmental backup and strategic review purposes. The look in her eyes, a disturbing blend of entitlement and cold calculation, had screamed danger. My desk phone remained silent, but an email notification popped up. It was from Chloe Davis, our bright and observant receptionist who doubled as a departmental assistant. Subject: quick question. Hi Ava, hope you're having an okay afternoon. Julian Croft from Summit Structures just called reception asking if you were available for a brief follow-up call regarding your conversation at the industry conference last week. He mentioned something about the Liberty Harbor designs. Let me know if you want me to put him through or schedule a time. I froze, my hand hovering over the mouse. Summit Structures was our biggest competitor. I had briefly exchanged pleasantries and a business card with Julian Croft at a sustainable architecture conference in Chicago, but we hadn't discussed specifics, certainly not the Liberty Harbor renewal project. That was a massive $50 million plus undertaking set to revitalize Port City's dilapidated harbor district, a project Eleanor had recently claimed as her flagship initiative within ADC. I had, however, spent weeks sketching concepts for it in my own time, a purely personal creative exercise exploring advanced sustainable urban design, never intended for official use or sharing. Thanks, Chloe, I typed back quickly. Can you tell Mr. Croft I'll need to call him back? Suggest maybe tomorrow morning? A knot tightened in my stomach, cold and heavy. This felt wrong. Why would Julian be asking me about Liberty Harbor? Unless Eleanor hadn't just taken credit internally. Could she have? The sinking feeling intensified. This wasn't just about stolen accolades anymore. Something far more complex and potentially damaging was unfolding. My career in architecture and design spanned 25 years. A journey that began with late nights hunched over drafting tables as an assistant in a small New York firm. I climbed the ladder steadily, tackling increasingly complex projects, from residential renovations to sprawling commercial complexes, eventually specializing in the innovative sustainable public spaces that became my signature. Along the way, I raised my daughter, now a bright young woman pursuing her own dreams at university, navigating the demanding balance of single motherhood and a high-pressure career. 7 years ago, Apex Design Collective recruited me from a respected boutique firm in Philadelphia. The offer was enticing, a senior design role with promises of creative autonomy, significant resources, and the opportunity to lead groundbreaking sustainable projects. For the first few years, under the mentorship of ADC's previous creative director, a brilliant but aging visionary, I flourished. My coastal restoration project, which pioneered the use of reclaimed materials and climate-resilient community spaces designed to withstand severe weather events, garnered national attention and became a benchmark for the firm, eventually winning the prestigious National Sustainable Design Prize. Then came Eleanor Vance. Hired initially from outside as a senior project manager, she possessed a keen understanding of corporate dynamics. She quickly cultivated favor with Mr. Arthur Kingsley, ADC's CEO, and a member of the founding family, who was respected but increasingly detached from day-to-day design operations. Eleanor's strategy was textbook: effusive praise for Mr. Kingsley's leadership, strategically arranged lunches, invitations to exclusive industry events, and weekend networking opportunities at her stylish Berkshire's retreat. Within 2 years, she had leapfrogged several more experienced colleagues to become the VP of Design, a remarkably swift ascent. Initially, I confess, I felt a grudging admiration for Eleanor's sheer drive. Her presentations were undeniably slick, her client interactions smooth and persuasive. She often stopped by my workstation, expressing effusive enthusiasm for my design concepts, asking insightful questions. Mistakenly, I interpreted her focused interest as a potential mentorship, perhaps even the beginning of a professional friendship based on mutual respect for design. How naive I was. The warning signs emerged gradually, like shadows lengthening in the afternoon sun. First, the collaborative presentations where my specific contributions mysteriously vanished from the narrative. Then, projects I had initiated and developed were abruptly reassigned, landing under Eleanor's direct oversight with vague explanations about strategic alignment. In client meetings and internal reviews, she began interrupting me more frequently, deftly rephrasing my complex ideas into simpler, more palatable soundbites she could claim ownership of. Ava has provided an interesting conceptual foundation, she might concede magnanimously, but I've refined it here into a more viable, market-ready solution. Mr. Kingsley, contemplating a gradual retirement and relying more heavily on his executive team, seemed genuinely impressed by Eleanor's confident delivery and apparent grasp of the firm's direction. Other senior partners, predominantly men established in their careers, appeared similarly swayed by her carefully cultivated image, a blend of sharp competence and just enough deference to their long experience. But my colleagues, those working alongside me in the design trenches, saw the reality. Marcus once pulled me aside after a particularly blatant hijacking of my riverfront park concept, whispering furiously, "Did she seriously just pass off your entire flood mitigation strategy as her breakthrough innovation?" Chloe, our perceptive receptionist, started discreetly adding digital timestamps to my original design submissions before filing them in the central server, offering silent nods of solidarity across the busy office floor. Still, I persevered, clinging to the belief that the quality and integrity of my work would ultimately prevail. When ADC won the National Sustainable Design Prize for the Coastal Project, I allowed myself a moment of quiet anticipation, expecting, finally, a public acknowledgement of my role as the lead designer. Instead, Eleanor accepted the award on stage alone, her acceptance speech a masterpiece of self-promotion, entirely omitting any mention of my foundational work or the dedicated team who brought it to life. The bitterness of that moment tasted like ash. That night, fueled by a potent mix of disillusionment and anger, I began the systematic process of backing up everything. Every design iteration, every email exchange related to concept development, every project note with a date stamp, all duplicated and secured in my personal cloud storage. It wasn't initially for confrontation. A part of me, perhaps foolishly, still hoped the situation might resolve itself, that fairness would somehow assert itself. It was for peace of mind, a digital anchor in a sea of growing uncertainty. Looking back, my reluctance to confront the situation directly seems painfully naive. Eleanor wasn't merely an ambitious opportunist seizing convenient moments. Her appropriation of others' work was systematic, calculated. Each stolen concept, each piece of misappropriated credit, was a deliberate stepping stone in her relentless climb up the corporate ladder. And I, with my proven track record of innovative, award-winning designs, had unwittingly become both her most valuable, exploitable resource and Simultaneously, her most significant potential threat. Our working relationship had curdled into an uneasy, toxic pattern. Eleanor took the credit, reaping the rewards and promotions, while I continued to produce the high-quality, innovative work that fueled her ascent. My resentment growing but my conflict-averse nature keeping me trapped in a cycle of quiet endurance. Until yesterday. Her request for my complete portfolio files, delivered with that unnerving mix of entitlement and strategic calculation, finally shattered my complacency. It was the move that signaled the endgame was approaching. Her need to control, or perhaps erase, the evidence of my contributions had become critical. My earlier unease coalesced into sharp suspicion. Why now? What was she planning? The phone call I needed to make to Julian Croft at Summit Structures suddenly felt far more urgent. What exactly had Eleanor told him about the Liberty Harbor designs? Later that week, I arranged the call with Julian Croft. His voice was courteous, professional, exactly as I remembered from the conference. "Ms. Sharma, Ava, thank you for taking the time," he began. "I hope you don't mind the outreach, but following our brief chat in Chicago, I was reviewing some materials related to the Liberty Harbor renewal project." "Ah yes, Liberty Harbor," I replied carefully, keeping my tone neutral. "A very ambitious project for Port City." "Indeed," Julian continued. "Eleanor Vance shared some preliminary concepts with our team at Summit last month. She indicated they were based on consultations you had provided, drawing on your expertise in sustainable waterfront development." My blood ran cold. Consultations I had provided? I had never formally consulted on Liberty Harbor for ADC, let alone shared my personal conceptual sketches with Eleanor or anyone else. Consultations? I echoed, trying to keep the shock from my voice. "There might be some misunderstanding, Julian. My work has primarily focused on ADC's internal projects recently." There was a brief pause on the line. "That's unexpected," Julian said slowly, a note of genuine confusion entering his voice. Eleanor presented these designs as a potential area for collaboration between ADC and Summit. She specifically highlighted certain innovative flood-resilient green space concepts attributed to your work. My stomach plummeted. She hadn't just presented them, she'd used my name and my reputation to lend credibility to stolen work, potentially trying to leverage it for a partnership with our main competitor. "Could you perhaps describe these concepts?" I asked, my voice tight despite my efforts. He described, with surprising accuracy, the core elements of my private sketches: the elevated, interconnected green zones linking historic structures, the modular public areas designed for reconfiguration during seasonal flooding, the integrated bioswales and reclaimed water systems. My ideas, unmistakably, rendered perhaps differently, maybe with slight modifications, but the unique conceptual DNA was mine. Eleanor's pitch was quite compelling, Julian admitted. "Based on the strength of those initial concepts, which she credited to your foundational work, we've actually incorporated several key elements into our preliminary proposal discussions with the Port City Development Commission." The office around me seemed to recede. This was exponentially worse than I'd imagined. Eleanor hadn't just stolen my ideas for internal gain, she had actively peddled my unauthorized, personal work to a major competitor, potentially jeopardizing ADC's own bid for the Liberty Harbor project and embroiling Summit in an ethical nightmare. And she had used my name to do it. "Julian," I said, struggling to keep my voice level, "I need to be very clear. I did not authorize the sharing of any preliminary concepts for Liberty Harbor with Summit Structures or any other external party. Those ideas were part of my independent research and development, not official ADC work product intended for dissemination." Another pause, longer this time. The professional warmth in Julian's voice cooled noticeably. "I see," he said, his tone now sharp-edged with concern. "This raises some serious questions, Ava. Who else at ADC or Port City has seen these specific designs presented as collaborative work?" According to Eleanor, key stakeholders on both sides were briefed, Julian replied, his voice tight with dawning realization. "Our executive team at Summit," and she implied preliminary positive feedback from the Port City Commission members. He hesitated, likely sensing the gravity of the situation from my reaction. "Ava, is there a significant issue here I need to be aware of?" "Julian, I need to address this internally immediately," I said, my mind racing. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention." Would you excuse me? After ending the call, I stared blankly at my monitor, the implications crashing down on me. Eleanor had likely accessed my personal files on the network or even my workstation when I was away, copied my Liberty Harbor sketches, and brazenly presented them as a joint ADC summit initiative, leveraging my reputation without my knowledge or consent. The sheer audacity, the depth of the ethical breach, was staggering. And suddenly, her push to terminate me made perfect, chilling sense. If Summit and Port City officials were moving forward based on designs falsely attributed to me, she needed me out of the picture, silenced and discredited, before I could expose the fraud. My secure cloud storage, filled with dated proof of my work's origin, felt less like insurance and more like ammunition I desperately needed to load. Just then, an urgent calendar notification popped onto my screen, mandatory all-hands meeting. Special announcement, 3 p.m. today, main conference room. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. Eleanor wasn't wasting any time. Returning from a brief, necessary walk to clear my head, I noticed the office atmosphere had shifted. The usual low hum of productivity was replaced by hushed conversations and anxious glances. People clustered in small groups, speaking quietly, occasionally casting sympathetic or curious looks my way. Marcus intercepted me near the coffee station, his expression grim. "Ava, things are moving fast," he murmured, keeping his voice low. "Mr. Kingsley just arrived unexpectedly. He flew in from the Chicago conference. The word is there's a major announcement about a transformative partnership with Summit Structures, involving the Liberty Harbor project." I guessed, the pieces clicking into place with sickening certainty. Marcus's eyes widened in surprise. "How did you know?" "Because Julian Croft from Summit just told me Eleanor pitched them my Liberty Harbor concepts last month, claiming I consulted on them." I whispered back, the bitterness rising. "Your concepts." Marcus looked bewildered. "But Eleanor's been championing Liberty Harbor internally for weeks. She's positioned it as her signature project. Rumor is, it's the key reason she's being tipped for that new chief design officer role they're creating." The final, ugly piece slammed into place. Eleanor wasn't just pushing me out to silence me, she was using my stolen work as the springboard for her ultimate promotion, cementing her power and erasing my contribution entirely. Just as the weight of that realization settled, a new email landed in my inbox. From HR, subject, transition details, confidential. I opened it with a sense of dread. It outlined my immediate termination, effective end of day today, citing organizational restructuring and role redundancy. They weren't even waiting until the end of the week as Eleanor had initially implied. She had accelerated everything. The email detailed a standard separation package, 2 months severance pay, contingent on signing a comprehensive release and non-disclosure agreement. My hand instinctively hovered over the icon for my secure cloud drive. It contained everything, the original Liberty Harbor files with metadata irrefutably proving my authorship and creation dates, the damning email exchanges with Eleanor about previous projects, documentation meticulously detailing my design process for years. More than enough evidence to expose her systematic theft and deception. But the timing felt orchestrated, designed to isolate me. Would anyone believe me against the newly anointed chief design officer, especially when Eleanor had likely spent weeks poisoning the well? Painting me as disgruntled or difficult. She had cultivated relationships with Mr. Kingsley and the board, projecting competence and loyalty while subtly undermining me. It would be her carefully crafted narrative against my word, backed by digital evidence they might dismiss or she might claim was fabricated. I logged out of the cloud storage without downloading the files to my work machine. Not yet. I needed to think, to strategize. This had escalated beyond fighting for credit. It was about professional ethics, potential legal ramifications for ADC and Summit, and the very survival of my career and reputation. The main conference room buzzed with nervous energy as colleagues filed in for the 3 p.m. meeting. I deliberately chose a seat near the back, trying to ignore the sympathetic glances and hushed whispers that seemed to follow me. Eleanor stood at the front, beside a somewhat tired-looking Mr. Kingsley. She radiated triumph, dressed in a sharp, impeccably tailored power suit, the one she reserved for closing major deals or making career-defining presentations. Mr. Kingsley cleared his throat, tapping the microphone lightly. "Thank you all for joining on short notice. Today marks a truly exciting and pivotal moment for Apex Design Collective. He paused for effect. We are thrilled to announce a landmark strategic partnership with Summit Structures, focused on the visionary Liberty Harbor Renewal Project in Port City. Behind him, the large screen flickered to life, displaying stunning renderings of the Liberty Harbor waterfront, my renderings, now subtly watermarked with both the ADC and Summit logos. A wave of nausea washed over me. This groundbreaking collaboration, Mr. Kingsley continued, his voice regaining some of its usual enthusiasm, spearheaded by the exceptional vision and leadership of Eleanor Vance, exemplifies the innovative, forward-thinking spirit that defines ADC. Eleanor's groundbreaking concepts for Liberty Harbor have already generated significant excitement with Port City officials and secured preliminary project endorsements. Eleanor stepped forward, beaming, accepting the implicit praise with a practiced nod. "Thank you, Mr. Kingsley," she said smoothly. "This project truly embodies our collective commitment to creating sustainable, resilient, and transformative urban environments." She began clicking through the presentation slides, my sketches, my detailed concepts, my late-night inspirations, explaining them with articulate confidence, weaving a narrative of her own brilliance, her singular vision. Each slide felt like another turn of the knife, twisting in the wound of betrayal. The air seemed to crackle with her success. And to lead ADC into this exciting new era of design innovation and strategic growth, Mr. Kingsley announced, his voice resonating with authority. "I am exceptionally pleased to appoint Eleanor Vance as our new Chief Design Officer, effective immediately." Polite, perhaps slightly stunned, applause filled the room. Eleanor inclined her head, accepting the accolades with expertly feigned humility, making sure to thank Mr. Kingsley profusely for his mentorship and trust. For a fleeting second, her gaze locked with mine across the crowded room. There was no triumph in that look, only cold, hard warning. When the applause died down and the meeting began to break up, I quickly made my way towards the front, intercepting Mr. Kingsley before he could leave. "Mr. Kingsley," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional, "could I possibly have a brief word with you privately regarding the Liberty Harbor project designs?" He looked slightly surprised but nodded. "Of course, Ava. My office is free." A flicker of hope ignited within me. Mr. Kingsley, despite his recent detachment, had always seemed fundamentally fair. Perhaps, presented with clear evidence away from Eleanor's immediate influence, he would listen. Perhaps he would recognize the truth. But Eleanor, ever vigilant, materialized beside us as if summoned. "Arthur," she said, using his first name with familiar ease, "we really should confirm the communications plan for the CDO transition right away. And weren't you scheduled for that board call at 3:30? Mr. Kingsley glanced at his watch, looking momentarily flustered. "Ah, yes, quite right." He turned back to me. "Ava, can this perhaps wait until tomorrow morning? It directly concerns the provenance and authorship of the Liberty Harbor designs presented today," I stated firmly, holding my ground. "This could not wait." Eleanor's smile tightened, losing its warmth entirely. "Actually, Arthur, that reminds me," she interjected smoothly, turning her focus fully on him. "There have been some performance and collaborative concerns regarding Ava's recent project contributions that I've been meaning to discuss with you privately." "Oh." Mr. Kingsley looked from Eleanor back to me, a frown creasing his brow. "Issues related to timely resource allocation, adherence to project deadlines," Eleanor continued, her tone shifting to one of grave concern. "And unfortunately, some recurring confusion regarding appropriate project ownership and attribution." Her implication was venomously clear. She wasn't just taking credit for my work, she was preemptively painting me as incompetent, difficult, and potentially unethical, the architect of my own downfall. "Right," Mr. Kingsley decided, his expression hardening slightly. "Let's address this now." He gestured towards his spacious office down the hall. "Both of you, please." For the next 20 agonizing minutes, trapped in the heavy silence of Mr. Kingsley's office, I listened as Eleanor methodically dismantled my professional reputation. With chilling precision, she presented carefully curated emails taken out of context, manipulated project timelines suggesting I had missed key deadlines, and vague references to team feedback. Regarding my alleged lack of collaboration, feedback I had never received in any formal review. She spoke of performance issues that were mysteriously absent from my consistently positive annual evaluations. The sickening culmination was her thinly veiled insinuation that I might have inappropriately accessed her conceptual work for the Liberty Harbor project, attempting to claim it as my own out of resentment. That is absolutely, categorically untrue. I finally interjected, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Mr. Kingsley, I have documented proof that contradicts every single one of these claims. Proof that the Liberty Harbor concepts are Ava, Mr. Kingsley interrupted, his tone weary but firm. Frankly, this back and forth isn't productive. He gestured towards a sleek digital folder Eleanor had apparently shared with him earlier. Eleanor has thoroughly documented her concerns over a period of time. His eyes met mine, devoid of the fairness I had hoped to find. Given these documented performance issues, combined with the necessary restructuring around our new strategic partnership and Eleanor's appointment as CDO, the leadership team feels it's in the firm's best interest to accelerate your departure. The air left my lungs. You're terminating me? Today? I asked, disbelief warring with the cold certainty dawning within me. Based on her unsubstantiated allegations? Without even reviewing my performance record or investigating her claims, Eleanor slid a crisp folder across the polished surface of the desk towards me. Your separation agreement, Ava, she said, her voice softening into a tone of feigned sympathy that was almost more insulting than her accusations. ADC is offering standard terms, 2-month severance pay, contingent on the usual conditions. Her eyes flickered towards Mr. Kingsley, then back to me. We will, of course, require you to clear your personal belongings from your workstation by the end of the business day. I stared down at the folder, the clean lines of the ADC logo suddenly seeming predatory. Rage, cold and sharp, battled with a rising tide of disbelief and a sickening sense of injustice. And if I choose to dispute these baseless allegations? I asked quietly, my voice dangerously low. Mr. Kingsley's expression became carefully neutral, his gaze unwavering. As I mentioned, Ava, the firm has documentation supporting performance concerns stretching back several months. His implication hung heavy in the air. Contesting this publicly would likely only cause unnecessary damage to your professional reputation moving forward. We both understood the unspoken threat. Eleanor hadn't just blindsided me, she had meticulously built a false case against me, manipulating records, twisting incidents, creating a narrative of incompetence designed to discredit me and justify my removal. Even with the irrefutable evidence stored safely in my cloud account, fighting this through legal channels would be a brutal, expensive, public battle, one that could easily tarnish my name permanently, regardless of the outcome. Eleanor had checkmated me. Or so she thought. I understand, I said, the words feeling like sawdust in my mouth. I reached out and took the folder, the weight of it feeling both immense and insignificant. Eleanor offered another sympathetic, yet triumphant, smile. I'll personally help manage the internal communications regarding this transition to ensure it's handled smoothly and professionally for everyone involved. She offered graciously. The perfect, helpful colleague seeing her problematic subordinate out the door. As I walked numbly out of Mr. Kingsley's office, leaving Eleanor behind to finalize her victory, my phone buzzed. An email notification. The subject line jumped out, Liberty Harbor Renewal Project, confidential docs. The sender address was unfamiliar, anonymized. My pulse quickened. Hesitantly, I opened it. The email contained attachments detailing upcoming phases of the Liberty Harbor project, sensitive timelines, internal budget allocations, confidential stakeholder contact information. Below the attachments, a short, unsigned message. You need to see this. What they're doing to you isn't right. Consider this leverage. A friend. For a dangerous moment, my anger surged, and I considered forwarding the entire explosive package directly to Mr. Kingsley. Proof. Proof they were cutting me out while relying on work rooted in my expertise. Then, the cold calculation behind the friendly gesture hit me. This wasn't help, it was a sophisticated trap. If I, a terminated employee, disseminated confidential project information belonging to ADC, especially information related to their new star project, Eleanor could instantly accuse me of corporate espionage, attempting to sabotage the firm out of spite. It would perfectly validate the false narrative she had constructed. She hadn't just fired me, she was trying to bait me into destroying myself. I deleted the email immediately, clearing it even from the trash folder, my hands shaking slightly. Clearing my desk felt surreal, each personal item a reminder of the 7 years I had dedicated to ADC. An HR representative, polite but watchful, stood nearby, ensuring I took only personal effects. The first thing into my sturdy canvas bag was my personal laptop, containing secure access to my cloud storage, my real insurance. Then came the framed photos of my daughter, the industry awards I'd won before Eleanor's arrival cast a long shadow, the small, resilient succulent plant my daughter had given me for my office warming, a symbol of endurance that now felt bitterly ironic. 7 years of creativity, dedication, and late nights, reduced to the contents of a single, standard-issue cardboard box. "I'm so sorry, Ava," Chloe whispered, stepping away from the reception desk to give me a quick, heartfelt hug as I waited for the elevator. Her eyes were filled with genuine sympathy. "This is completely wrong. We all know what really happened, who did the real work." Her quiet support, the affirmation from someone who saw the daily reality, meant more than she could know. "Thank you, Chloe," I managed, touched by her kindness and courage. "Take care of yourself." Outside, the late afternoon sun felt harsh. I hailed a cab, giving the driver my home address before sinking heavily into the back seat, the cardboard box resting on the floor at my feet. Only then, cocooned in the anonymity of the moving vehicle, did I allow the full weight of the day's events to crash down on me. My career at ADC, a place I had once felt proud to work, was over. My professional reputation, meticulously built over 25 years, was under direct attack. 7 years of my creative energy, my intellectual property, effectively stolen and used to discard me. My phone buzzed again, persistently, with texts from Marcus and a few other concerned colleagues. I silenced it, shoving it deep into my bag. I needed space. I needed to think clearly, without the noise of well-intentioned sympathy or outrage. The separation agreement lay in the folder inside my bag, its presence a heavy weight. 2 months' salary. A paltry sum offered in exchange for my complete silence, my complicity in their lies. And a legally binding acknowledgement that my performance was inadequate. Signing it felt like agreeing that Eleanor's theft was justified. Refusing it meant facing a costly, uncertain battle against a well-resourced company determined to protect its new star and bury its mistakes. Back in the quiet sanctuary of my apartment, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside my window, I poured myself a much-needed glass of crisp Sauvignon Blanc. I opened my personal laptop, the familiar glow a small comfort. First things first, I initiated another full backup of my evidence folders to a secondary, encrypted cloud account, ensuring redundancy. Then, I opened a fresh document and began outlining my potential options, researching employment law specifics in our state, intellectual property rights for architects, and precedents for wrongful termination based on fraudulent grounds. My mind, usually buzzing with design concepts, was now methodically dissecting legal strategies. A sharp knock at the door startled me. Through the peephole, I saw Marcus's worried face. He must have gotten my address from Chloe. "Hey," he said softly when I opened the door, his expression a mixture of anger and concern. "Just wanted to make sure you were okay. Everything happened so damn fast today." "Come in," I said, stepping back, genuinely grateful for the friendly face. Pouring him a glass of wine, I recounted the meeting with Eleanor and Mr. Kingsley, the accusations, the immediate termination. He listened intently, his anger growing visibly. "She had this planned all along, Ava," he said, shaking his head. "The timing, the partnership announcement, her promotion, it was a perfectly orchestrated coup." "It gets worse, Marcus," I said grimly, taking a shaky sip of wine. "Julian Croft from Summit called me earlier. Eleanor pitched them my Liberty Harbor concepts, claiming I consulted." Marcus stared at me, aghast. "She what?" "But wait," he frowned, leaning forward. "After you left the office, things got uglier. Eleanor held a clarification meeting with the design teams. She told everyone you'd been let go due to performance issues and hinted strongly that you'd been inappropriately sharing proprietary ADC concepts with outside competitors." I almost dropped my glass. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it. She was accusing me of exactly the unethical behavior she herself had committed. "She actually showed emails, Ava," Marcus continued, his voice low and troubled. Screenshots of messages, supposedly from your ADC account, sent last month, appearing to attach design files to external addresses. That's impossible. I exclaimed, bewildered. I never sent anything like that. I would never dash. I stopped abruptly, a horrifying possibility dawning. Wait. When exactly did she claim these emails were sent? Marcus furrowed his brow, thinking back. She mentioned specific dates. I think around the middle of last month. He named the week. The week I was completely off the grid, on a much-needed vacation in Vancouver, celebrating my daughter's college acceptance. The week Eleanor had graciously offered to cover any urgent project needs in my absence. She had access to my workstation, I realized aloud, the pieces falling into place with nauseating clarity. She must have accessed my account while I was gone and sent those emails herself, or fabricated them. That would make sense, Marcus agreed grimly. The timing fits. But Ava, she presented it very convincingly. Showed the sent items screenshots. Even people who respect you, who know your work, she planted seeds of doubt. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just theft and dismissal, it was a calculated, multi-pronged campaign to utterly destroy my professional credibility. Ensuring I would have no ground to stand on if I tried to fight back. There's something else, Marcus said hesitantly, swirling the wine in his glass. Just a rumor, circulating after the meeting. Whispers that Summit Structures might be looking to hire you, maybe as a consultant, once your ADC non-compete expires. What? I stared at him, uncomprehending. Why on earth would they? Then it hit me with the force of a physical blow. The final, insidious layer of her plan. The job offer from the very competitor she'd fed my stolen designs to. It wasn't a lifeline, it was the linchpin of her entire fabricated narrative. If I accepted any offer from Summit, even months down the line, Eleanor could point to it as definitive proof that I had been secretly colluding with them all along, selling my designs, betraying ADC. It would retroactively validate her accusations and my termination. Marcus nodded grimly, confirming my unspoken realization. It's the perfect insurance policy for her. If you take any legal action against ADC or challenge her story, she'll use that in future collaboration narrative to paint you as the villain and discredit you completely. After Marcus left, expressing his unwavering support and urging me to fight, I sat in stunned silence, the wine untouched. The sheer Machiavellian complexity of Eleanor's scheme was breathtaking. She hadn't just reacted or opportunistically seized chances, she had meticulously planned multiple steps ahead, anticipating my likely reactions and proactively neutralizing them before I could even make a move. She hadn't just stolen my work, she was trying to steal my entire professional future. My phone rang again, displaying an unknown number. Hesitantly, against my better judgment, I answered. Ms. Sharma? Julian Croft from Summit Structures again. His voice was polite but carried a new note of caution. I apologize for calling again so soon, but I wanted to follow up on our conversation from earlier. Mr. Croft, I began carefully, choosing my words with extreme precision. As I indicated, I needed to address the situation internally. Following that, I must inform you that I am no longer employed by Apex Design Collective as of this afternoon. Therefore, I am not in a position to discuss anything related to ADC or the Liberty Harbor project. There was a brief, surprised silence. Ah, Julian said slowly. Well, that is unexpected news, Ava. He paused. Actually, he continued, his tone shifting slightly, in a way, that might be why this call is timely. As I mentioned, our leadership team at Summit was genuinely impressed by the innovative concepts Eleanor Vance presented, the ones attributed to your expertise. Given that you are now available, we would be very interested in discussing a potential senior consulting role or even a permanent position with Summit Structures. There it was. The perfectly timed, perfectly poisonous offer. Confirmation of Marcus's warning, validation of Eleanor's intricate trap. Taking that job, or even seriously entertaining it now, would be professional suicide. Mr. Croft, I appreciate the potential interest, I replied, keeping my voice measured and non-committal. However, given the circumstances of my departure from ADC, I need some time to carefully consider my next steps. Perhaps I could reach out to you in a few weeks? Of course, Ava, he said smoothly. Take all the time you need. The door at Summit remains open. After hanging up, the calculated nature of it all left a bitter taste in my mouth. I turned back to my laptop, not to legal research this time, but to my meticulously organized email archive within the secure cloud storage. Years of communication with Eleanor. There had to be something more concrete, something she couldn't dismiss or twist. I began searching systematically, keyword by keyword, through 7 years of project correspondence, meeting notes, and informal exchanges. Hours passed. Then, deep within a subfolder labeled Coastal Restoration Project, Phase 2 Comms, Archive, dating back nearly 3 years, I found it. An email chain I had completely forgotten about. Eleanor, relatively new in her management role then and struggling with a technical challenge on a different, now defunct project, had reached out to me for help. And in her request, she had explicitly, unequivocally acknowledged my authorship of the original, award-winning coastal design. Ava, the email read, hitting a wall on the Brighton Pier sustainability plan. Could really use your magic touch on the storm surge modeling? Need that kind of innovative, resilient thinking that made your coastal restoration project such a groundbreaking success. My heart leaped. It wasn't just circumstantial evidence or metadata, it was Eleanor Vance, in her own typed words, attributing the very project she now claimed as her crowning achievement directly to me. It was the smoking gun. A surge of adrenaline, fueled by renewed determination, cut through my exhaustion. This changed everything. I spent the entire weekend immersed in building my counteroffensive. The discovered email was the cornerstone, but it was just the beginning. I cross-referenced it with project timelines, design file metadata, and my own detailed project logs stored securely in the cloud. I meticulously constructed a comprehensive timeline, documenting every instance of Eleanor's appropriation of my work, contrasting her claims with dated evidence of my original contributions. By Sunday night, hunched over my laptop amidst scattered notes and empty coffee cups, I had compiled a formidable digital dossier. It contained original design files with verifiable metadata proving my authorship long before Eleanor's involvement, archived email chains clearly showing the evolution of key concepts initiated and developed by me, which Eleanor later presented as her own, copies of my consistently positive performance reviews starkly contradicting her sudden claims of inadequacy, and even anonymized copies of testimonials from former clients who had specifically praised my direct contributions on shared projects. It was a mountain of irrefutable evidence. Monday morning dawned crisp and clear. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, the anger now channeled into focused resolve. My plan was direct and surgical. First, draft a formal, detailed complaint to the ADC Board of Directors, attaching the key pieces of evidence from my dossier. Second, schedule a consultation with a highly recommended employment lawyer specializing in intellectual property and wrongful termination. Third, prepare a concise summary of the situation, ready to be shared with the Port City officials and potentially Julian Croft at Summit, if necessary, to counter Eleanor's narrative. As I was reviewing the draft of my complaint one final time, checking every date and reference, an email notification popped up. From Arthur Kingsley. Subject, urgent, Liberty Harbor project developments. My breath caught. Ava, the message read, concerning developments have emerged regarding the Liberty Harbor project following Friday's announcement. I need to speak with you immediately. Are you available to meet privately this morning? A cautious spark of hope flickered. Had Eleanor's deception already started to unravel? Had the Port City officials asked questions she couldn't answer? I quickly typed a reply, agreeing to meet him at a neutral coffee shop near the ADC office complex at 10 a.m. Mr. Kingsley looked distinctly uncomfortable when he arrived, slumping slightly into the chair opposite me. The usual air of confident authority was gone, replaced by visible anxiety. He looked older, more haggard than he had just days before. Ava, thank you for agreeing to meet on such short notice, he began, avoiding my direct gaze initially. He stirred his coffee unnecessarily. I'll be direct. Following our internal announcement on Friday, the Port City Development Commission contacted us with several follow-up technical questions regarding the Liberty Harbor design concepts. He paused, taking a sip of coffee. They were, as I said, very impressed with the innovation presented, particularly the sustainable and flood-resilient aspects. So much so, they wanted to feature the lead designer's process in their upcoming public relations materials for the project launch. I waited, keeping my expression carefully neutral, though my heart rate quickened. I sensed where this was heading. Eleanor, Mr. Kingsley continued, finally meeting my eyes, his own reflecting deep concern. Was unable to adequately answer their specific technical inquiries, particularly regarding the integration of the modular green spaces and the long-term ecological impact modeling. When pressed for details by their lead engineer, she apparently became evasive, citing proprietary methods still under development. He sighed heavily. To complicate matters further, one of the senior commissioners, who vaguely recalled your presentation work on the award-winning coastal restoration project years ago, recognized certain similar design philosophies and specifically asked about your direct involvement in developing the Liberty Harbor concepts. And what was Eleanor's response to that? I asked quietly. Mr. Kingsley grimaced, clearly uncomfortable. She claimed you had acted as her internal mentor on sustainability principles, that you had provided foundational guidance based on your previous work, but that she herself had evolved those initial thoughts into the final approved design for Liberty Harbor. Despite the gravity of the situation, a short, sharp laugh escaped me. Her mentor. The audacity was almost comical if it weren't so infuriating. Mr. Kingsley, Eleanor Vance has been systematically taking credit for my original design work for the past 3 years. I'm beginning to see that, he admitted, his voice low, laced with regret. The Port City officials were not satisfied with her explanation. They have officially paused progress on the ADC Summit partnership pending clarification of design authorship and technical feasibility. Our potentially lucrative partnership with Summit Structures is now in serious jeopardy. Why are you telling me this, Mr. Kingsley? I asked, allowing a touch of ice into my tone. I was terminated on Friday, remember? Based on Eleanor's documented concerns about my performance and ethics. He had the grace to look ashamed. Because, he said, leaning forward slightly, his voice dropping, Eleanor now insists that you possess the original detailed technical files and conceptual background materials that could potentially resolve these questions from Port City. She's suggesting to the board that you maliciously withheld these critical files or took them with you when you left on Friday, deliberately sabotaging the project launch out of spite. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. The sheer, unmitigated nerve. Even cornered, she was attempting to manipulate the situation, trying to paint me as the villain and pressure me into handing over my evidence to save her skin. Likely so she could then continue to claim it as her own. I do have the original files, Mr. Kingsley, I confirmed, my voice steady and cold, along with extensive timestamp documentation irrefutably proving that the core innovative concepts for Liberty Harbor, the very concepts that impressed Port City, are entirely my work. Developed independently long before Eleanor presented them, and I also have proof that Eleanor was aware of this. Mr. Kingsley leaned forward further, his expression urgent now. Ava, the firm's reputation is on the line. ADC cannot afford a public scandal over design authorship, especially not on a project of this magnitude with Summit involved. We need to resolve this immediately and discreetly. Reinstate me, I stated flatly, the demand clear and non-negotiable. Full reinstatement to my senior architectural designer position, clear my personnel file of all fraudulent claims, issue a formal apology, and remove Eleanor Vance entirely from any oversight or involvement in projects based on my designs, including Liberty Harbor. He recoiled slightly. That's simply not feasible, Ava. Eleanor has already been publicly announced as Chief Design Officer. Reversing that decision now would create chaos and undermine the board's authority. Then my only remaining option, I countered calmly, is to take my comprehensive evidence directly to the Port City Development Commission and simultaneously share it with the relevant architectural ethics boards and industry press. Let them determine the rightful authorship. Mr. Kingsley visibly paled, the implications hitting him fully. You would risk damaging the entire firm, potentially sinking this vital partnership, just to get back at Eleanor, he asked. Disbelief warring with dawning horror. No, Mr. Kingsley, I corrected firmly but quietly. I would simply be ensuring that the truth is known and that I receive proper credit for my intellectual property. Any resulting damage to ADC or the Summit partnership would be the direct consequence of Eleanor's documented actions and the firm's initial failure to address them. Not mine. As the weight of our impasse hung heavy in the air between us, my phone buzzed on the table. A news alert notification from a major architectural trade publication. Headline: Summit Structures announces unexpected withdrawal from Port City Liberty Harbor Partnership citing due diligence concerns. I silently turned my phone screen towards Mr. Kingsley. His face fell, his shoulders slumping in defeat as he read the headline. The foundation of Eleanor's grand strategy was already crumbling. It's unraveling even faster than you thought, Mr. Kingsley, I said, my voice softening slightly, not out of pity, but strategy. Summit is clearly cutting its losses before the scandal breaks. You have one rapidly closing window to get ahead of this. To control the narrative and salvage what's left of ADC's reputation before this explodes publicly. He stared into his now cold coffee, the wheels turning behind his eyes. No doubt frantically calculating the potential fallout and his limited options. What exactly do you want, Ava? He asked finally, his voice weary. My terms remain the same regarding reinstatement and clearing my name, I reiterated. Additionally, I require a formal public acknowledgement from ADC recognizing my specific contributions to the coastal restoration project and other key designs previously attributed to Eleanor. Eleanor must be removed from any project involving my work, effective immediately. And, I added, leaning forward slightly, I want the opportunity to personally present my original complete Liberty Harbor concepts to the Port City officials myself, representing ADC. And the termination, he asked quietly. The separation agreement? I have not decided my final course of action regarding potential legal claims, I replied truthfully. But under no circumstances will I be signing that separation agreement. Mr. Kingsley nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of my demands. I will need to consult urgently with the board. But the critical situation with Port City requires immediate action. We need those files, Ava. You'll have them, I assured him, once my conditions are met in writing. As Mr. Kingsley hurried away, looking shaken but galvanized, my phone buzzed again. 2 new emails. One was from Julian Croft at Summit Structures. Subject: Following up, Port City clarification. Ava, it read, given today's developments regarding Summit's position on the Liberty Harbor project, Port City officials are now urgently requesting clarification directly from potential original sources regarding the design concepts Eleanor Vance presented. They specifically mentioned your name based on Mr. Kingsley's communications. Should you be willing, your direct input would be highly valued. The second email was from a senior urban planner at the Port City Development Commission, reaching out to my personal email address. Likely obtained from Julian or through industry contacts. Subject: Liberty Harbor Waterfront Revitalization Concepts, Inquiry. It politely requested my availability to discuss specific questions regarding the sustainable elements and flood resilience features embedded in the preliminary designs they had reviewed. While Mr. Kingsley was scrambling to deliberate with his board and contain the internal fallout, the situation was rapidly evolving beyond his or Eleanor's control. The very clients and stakeholders Eleanor had tried to impress using my stolen work were now bypassing ADC's dysfunctional hierarchy and reaching out directly to me. The actual source. For the first time since that devastating meeting in Eleanor's office, a genuine, hard-won smile touched my lips. Eleanor Vance had built her career on the precarious foundation of taking credit for the brilliance of others. Now, ironically, her very inability to authentically explain or defend the innovative designs she had so proudly claimed as her own was poised to expose her fraud to everyone who mattered. The stage was set for the final act. Tuesday morning arrived with a palpable sense of inevitability, heavy with the promise of confrontation and resolution. After a series of carefully navigated phone calls and email exchanges late Monday with key individuals from Port City and now independent executives from Summit Structures, I had agreed to participate in a joint meeting convened urgently at the ADC headquarters. The stated purpose: to definitively clarify the design authorship issues surrounding the Liberty Harbor renewal project. I dressed with deliberate care, choosing a sharply tailored pantsuit in a deep charcoal gray, professional, confident, conveying authority without unnecessary flamboyance. My personal laptop, containing the meticulously organized dossier of evidence, felt solid and reassuring in my briefcase. Alongside printed copies of the most critical documents, the incriminating email from Eleanor, the metadata reports, comparative timelines, This time, unlike my unprepared walk into Mr. Kingsley's office days before, I was armed and ready. A tense silence fell over the expansive main conference room as I entered. Mr. Kingsley sat at the head of the long, polished table, looking grim. Flanked by two stern-faced members of the ADC board of directors whom I recognized. On one side sat the delegation from Port City, the senior planner who had emailed me, accompanied by their lead engineer and legal counsel. Julian Croft, representing Summit Structures now purely as an interested observer with prior knowledge, sat beside them. Eleanor Vance sat alone on the opposite side of the table, isolated. Her usual effortless poise was gone, replaced by a rigid posture and a palpable aura of tense vigilance. Her eyes darted towards me as I took a seat directly across from her, then quickly looked away. "Thank you all for attending this critical meeting on such short notice," Mr. Kingsley began, his voice strained but formal. "We are here today to address and resolve the serious questions that have arisen regarding the conceptual origins and technical authorship of the proposed designs for the Liberty Harbor Renewal Project." Before he could continue, Eleanor seized the initiative, her voice sharp and defensive. "Arthur, if I may," she interrupted, addressing Mr. Kingsley but angling her body towards the Port City delegation. "I would like to preface this discussion by expressing my profound disappointment that such confusion has been allowed to arise regarding my work on this project. While Ms. Sharma," she gestured dismissively in my direction, "may have contributed some initial, very high-level brainstorming feedback during the early ideation phase, the fully developed concepts presented to Port City and Summit were entirely the product of my own design development and strategic refinement." "Actually," I interjected calmly but firmly, my voice cutting through her attempt to control the narrative. I rose and smoothly connected my laptop to the large display screen at the end of the room. "Rather than debating recollections, I believe it would be more efficient if I simply demonstrated the documented facts." For the next 20 minutes, the only sounds in the room were my steady voice explaining the evidence and the click of the presentation remote. I methodically walked them through my dossier. Original Liberty Harbor design files, clearly displaying metadata timestamps that predated Eleanor's alleged development period by months. In some cases even years for the foundational concepts adapted from earlier personal research. Detailed process documentation logs from my personal cloud storage, showing the clear evolution of the specific sustainable and flood-resilient concepts in question. Screenshots of the archived email exchanges, including the crucial one where Eleanor herself explicitly praised and acknowledged my authorship regarding the principles applied in the coastal restoration project, principles clearly adapted in the Liberty Harbor designs. I presented side-by-side comparisons of my original sketches and the renderings Eleanor had presented, highlighting the minimal, superficial changes she had made. "As you can clearly see from the independently verifiable digital evidence," I concluded, turning to face the room, my gaze sweeping across the Port City officials, Julian Croft, the board members, and finally settling on Eleanor. "These core innovative designs represent my original intellectual property, developed independently over a significant period. Furthermore, key elements were shared internally and externally by Ms. Vance without my knowledge or authorization, following a documented pattern where she previously took credit for my coastal restoration project concepts without attribution." The Port City officials exchanged meaningful glances. Their lead engineer leaned towards the microphone. "Ms. Sharma," he said, his tone respectful but pointedly directed, "these detailed technical specifications and the design evolution logs you've just shown us, these are precisely the background materials and clarifications we have been requesting from Ms. Vance for the past week." He turned his gaze towards Eleanor. Details which, frankly, Ms. Vance seemed unable or unwilling to provide. "This is preposterous," Eleanor finally exploded, her voice rising sharply, the mask of composure shattering. She shot to her feet. "This is a fabrication. She's manipulated those timestamps. She's digitally altered those emails." Her eyes flashed with desperation and fury. "She's trying to sabotage my career, sabotage this entire project, because she's bitter and jealous of my promotion." "Actually, Ms. Vance," Julian Croft interjected smoothly, his voice calm but carrying weight, "our own internal technical team at Summit conducted a preliminary forensic analysis of the metadata on the initial concept files you shared with us last month. Their findings align completely with Ms. Sharma's presentation. These are, unquestionably, the original source files, predating your claimed development timeline. A low murmur went through the room. Then, one of the ADC board members spoke, his voice quiet but firm. Furthermore, Eleanor, he added, looking directly at her, our internal IT department, at the board's request, conducted a security audit over the weekend. Their logs confirm multiple instances of unauthorized access to Ms. Sharma's workstation and network files originating from your credentials during the week she was documented as being on vacation last month. Eleanor's face drained of all color. She visibly swayed, gripping the edge of the table as she realized her meticulously constructed web of lies was irrevocably collapsing around her. Shredded by cold, hard, digital facts. Arthur. Mr. Kingsley, you can't possibly believe. She stammered, turning pleadingly towards the head of the table. Eleanor, Mr. Kingsley interrupted, his voice heavy with finality, devoid of any remaining sympathy. He looked not angry, but profoundly disappointed and weary. I think it's time for you to leave. Eleanor Vance's downfall was as swift and complete as her ascent had been ruthlessly efficient. Escorted discreetly from the ADC building later that afternoon, she left behind a chaotic trail of professional deceit and ethical breaches that unraveled with astonishing speed once the protective shield of her authority was removed and people felt safe enough to ask the right questions. The emergency board meeting that followed was brief and decisive. Mr. Kingsley, now fully galvanized and fighting desperately to salvage ADC's battered reputation and its relationship with Port City, announced my immediate reinstatement. More than that, acknowledging the gross injustice and the undeniable quality of my work. The board approved my appointment to the newly established role of Chief Design Officer, the very position Eleanor had schemed to attain through fraud. The Port City officials, deeply impressed by my original, detailed Liberty Harbor concepts and my comprehensive understanding of the project's technical and sustainable nuances, formally requested that I personally lead the project moving forward, effectively salvaging the potentially lucrative contract for ADC. Albeit without Summit's direct partnership for now. Perhaps most satisfying on a personal level was the carefully worded, yet unambiguous company-wide email Mr. Kingsley circulated the following day. It publicly acknowledged my foundational contributions to ADC's portfolio of award-winning projects, including the National Sustainable Design Prize-winning coastal restoration, explicitly clarifying that the innovative designs recently attributed to Eleanor Vance were, in fact, the product of my work and vision. It was a quiet but profound vindication. I profoundly underestimated you, Ava, Mr. Kingsley admitted when we met privately in his office later that week to discuss the path forward. He looked genuinely chastened. And I deeply regret that I didn't listen more closely when you initially tried to raise concerns. Yes, Mr. Kingsley, you should have, I agreed, meeting his gaze evenly. While needing his support now, I wasn't ready to absolve him, or the enabling culture at ADC, too easily. 7 years of my dedicated work was systematically misappropriated while leadership looked the other way or chose to believe a more convenient narrative. His flinch confirmed he understood the weight of his, and the firm's, failure. But it was a start. 1 month later, I stood before the Port City Development Commission, confidently presenting my refined, authentic vision for the Liberty Harbor Renewal Project. The energy in the room was optimistic, collaborative. The project was officially back on track, now under my direct leadership at ADC. Interestingly, Summit Structures, impressed by the integrity shown during the resolution, had re-engaged, proposing a new, more transparent collaborative structure where contributions would be clearly defined and acknowledged, a partnership I was now carefully considering under the right terms. Eleanor, meanwhile, had become a whispered cautionary tale within the intensely competitive architecture and design industry. After my situation came to light, 2 other designers from her previous firms quietly came forward with disturbingly similar stories of appropriated work and manipulated credit. Her carefully crafted reputation was left in tatters. The last I heard, through industry gossip, she had left the field of architecture entirely, unable to find another position. As for me, my career had unexpectedly entered a new, more visible phase. The leadership spotlight I had unconsciously avoided for years, preferring to let my work speak for itself, now felt less intimidating, more like an opportunity. As CDO, I immediately implemented clear, rigorous protocols for design attribution and intellectual property tracking within ADC. I made mentorship for emerging talent a priority, ensuring that young designers felt supported and their contributions valued. And finally, after years of laboring in the shadows cast by another's ambition, I was receiving the direct recognition and respect my work had always deserved. Standing in the bustling ADC design studio late one evening, reviewing the latest renderings for Liberty Harbor, I looked out the window towards the distant harbor, envisioning the positive impact our work could have. Marcus and Chloe stopped by my office door, genuine smiles on their faces, offering congratulations on a positive review the project received in a major design journal. Their steadfast support had been a quiet anchor during the storm. A quiet satisfaction settled over me, deeper and more meaningful than the fleeting thrill of revenge. It wasn't just about reclaiming what was stolen. It was about affirming my own value, proving my capabilities not just as a designer, but as a leader who stood firm for integrity. My internal narration echoed the sentiment, a quiet promise to myself. I didn't just take back what was mine. I defined my worth, on my own terms. The fight had been arduous, the betrayal deeply wounding, but the hard-won clarity and the chance to lead authentically? That felt like a foundation worth building upon.